You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lemons podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're going to make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. I have a very, very special guest for you this week because it features Andrew Goldstone. Now, Andrew Goldstone is a music industry pioneer, and he has managed artists like Tiësto and Don Diablo, and now he's currently managing Blau and Sullivan King. Now, he will give a very, very good introduction as to who he is and how he got to where he's at, but we talk about a whole bunch of things. We talk about how he got to where he's at. We talked about a whole bunch of NFT stuff. We talked about Blau's NFT sale and how he got to that NFT sale. We talked about the blockchain, and we discussed how the blockchain kind of works, and we talked about how the money is kind of moved around and how artists get the money and how it's kind of functioning, because a few months ago we saw a pretty big lull in NFTs, and back in February and March they were all the hype and everybody and their mother was starting an NFT and launching an NFT, and now the last couple months have been very quiet on NFTs. But Andrew is optimistic and says that they will be coming back, and he's seeing a positive increase in that from July and now August. And we also talk about the environmental impacts that NFTs have, and he gave some very optimistic advice as to where they are going and how a big update is coming in the next couple 6 weeks to 8 weeks in regards to that. So that is great for the climate and all of that fun stuff. So I will let Andrew tell his story, but before I do, I want to remind you to please sign up to my email list. That helps me notify you when new episodes like this are live. You can find that in the show notes below. You can also find it on my website, which is lennonseahawk.com, which is where I post all of these episodes, and you can link to all of my socials there. I would appreciate if you would follow me on Instagram, send me a message, say hello. If you have any questions on anything we discussed in the episode, feel free to let me know. Give me a follow. I post industry musings there and my daily life there. I would also appreciate a follow on Twitter. And if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, there is a link in the show notes below. Please fill that out. I'm always looking for amazing guests like Andrew and last week's episode with Giannis from Cloud Kid. Lastly, I would appreciate a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or leaving a comment on YouTube, or thumbs upping. All those things help be discovered in the algorithm and help it push it to new listeners and be discovered by amazing people. So without further ado, let's jump in to my conversation with the incredibly talented musical pioneer and one-of-a-kind Andrew Goldstone. Cool. Well, thanks for joining me, Andrew. I appreciate you being on. I'm excited to chat with you. I was reading quite a bit about you. And so where are you based at?
New York.
New York.
City.
Cool.
Yeah.
How long have you been in New York?
My whole life. I was born and raised there.
Cool. So talk about your journey kind of growing up and then getting into music, and then how you kind of transitioned into management. Have you always been in management? Give us a little backstory so I know where we're coming from.
Sure. Growing up, once I was in high school, I realized that I wanted to be in the music business. And at that time, because I'm not so young, there was no internet. And so I literally went through a phone book. Having looked at the records that I had and the records that I liked, I went through the phone book and found the record companies that I liked and called them and said, I would like to intern for you. And so I ended up interning at Chrysalis Records when I was 16. And I was like, this is the coolest thing of all time, even though all I was really doing was like transcribing video interviews and doing completely menial work. But just the opportunity to be around people who were in the business and listen to conversations and hear about what was going on was amazing to me. And so when I was in college, I was on, I was DJ on the college radio station. And then during college, I had a couple internships at other, like I worked at 4AD one summer. And there was another one, but I can't remember what it was. So I had a couple other internships, which were, again, just, I loved being around, record labels and places where music was being released. So when I got out of college, I got a job, which was the only job in the music business that I got, which was basically being an independent radio promoter, but for, college radio stations promoting alternative music, which was, anything. I mean, this is the early 90s. So it's, I'm trying to think what I promoted. We did Beastie Boys, Rage Against the Machine, Helmet. I don't remember what else. So I did that for a couple of years, but I had always kind of been into dance music, new wave. And then I spent a semester in London when kind of rave was really taking off. And so dance music was a huge passion for me. And I was going out in New York and going to all these shows that were, dance music artists. This is the early 90s. And at some point, a guy I knew emailed me, I don't even remember, and said, I'm starting this label called Astralwerks. Would you like to come do A&R? And at the time I was working at EMI Records, and I was making a reasonably good salary. And this was taking a 50% pay cut. But there was nothing more in the world that I wanted to do than that. Sure. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to do that. So I went to Astralwerks, and I was, lucky. I had found some records by this guy, Fatboy Slim. And I was like, I feel like this is really going to be interesting for the American audience because it's such a unique mix of dance music and rock. And so I signed that first album for America, and it did quite well, and as did the second. And so kind of off the back of that, and this is late 90s, every major label wanted to have a dance music imprint. It was kind of like, that was the cool thing to do. So Warner Brothers approached me and said, would you like to come have an imprint at Warner Brothers? And obviously my answer to that was yes. It turned out to be relatively pointless because they really just wanted an imprint. They didn't really want to do anything about it. And what I was interested in signing was just didn't, it went over everybody's heads, kind of. I mean, and not that it was incredibly esoteric, like, I signed Green Velvet, and this incredible sort of disco house group from England called Phase Action. But it didn't connect. This is Warner Brothers. These are rock and roll and pop people. It just was like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And so following that, when my deal was done, I left and went to Ministry of Sound, who were opening up an office in America. Did A&R for them for a little bit, couple of years, signed an amazing band called Fischerspooner. And that album is, to this day, one of my favorites. And then 9/11 happened, and dance music in America kind of evaporated. It just was not. It wasn't viable anymore. No, there was nothing. People, the labels had kind of disappeared. Nobody wanted to make the investment, and I was in a situation where I was like, I can't credibly turn around and say I'm now a pop A&R guy or I'm a rap A&R guy. Like, I'm not. I can't be. I don't know that stuff. Sure. So my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, comes from a family of lawyers, said you should go to law school. And I was like, that's a terrible idea. I don't want to go to law school. Why would I do that? And then kind of the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, actually, if given that I have been out in the world and worked at labels and done all these things, I'm actually going to be viewed very differently when I get out of law school than the person who has gone straight through from college. And maybe there are opportunities there that are different and interesting in a way that, the A&R opportunities won't be. So I went to law school, and that was very challenging, but and very humbling. I came in having had a reasonable amount of success as an A&R guy, and at law school I was just like the old guy. Nobody, law school is incredibly competitive. Nobody gave a shit what I had done. It was just like I just needed to get great grades. Mm-hmm. And so when I got out of law school, I was again very lucky in that my work history afforded me, a different perspective. And so I interviewed at this firm, which at the time was called Grubman Shire, but run by this sort of legendary entertainment attorney named Alan Grubman. And I worked there for about 7 years. And it was, I was, literally one of the first deals I worked on was, when 360 deals were just starting to happen. Live Nation did deals with Madonna and U2. I worked on both of those deals. I was very lucky that I just was at a place where incredibly interesting and incredibly interesting deals were happening, and there were extraordinary clients. So, Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, U2, Usher, Nicki Minaj, Cascade, just an incredible spectrum of clients. So I was, privy to all sorts of things that I would never otherwise have been at a different firm. So, but in 2013, a friend of mine who is still Tiësto's booking agent, a guy named Paul Morris, reached out to me and said, would you be interested in being Tiësto's manager? He's looking for a new manager. And my answer to that was obviously yes. I would be very interested. We met and got along, and I managed him for about 4 years. Because I was coming from a law firm, I didn't have a management apparatus around me. So they really felt like Red Light was a good place to be. And so I went to Red Light. And that's, from there, I've been a manager. But, this is really kind of my third career iteration. Yeah. It's been, the irony is if you had asked me, 20 years ago, if I wanted to be a manager, I would have told you that was like literally the last thing I wanted to be. I think it's also very different when you come in, when you start your management career managing Tiësto, it's a very different experience, and I'm super grateful for that. Mm-hmm. But I love not being a lawyer day in and day out. And it's, management is very challenging. intellectually, emotionally, in all sorts of ways. But it's also incredibly gratifying when you see what you're building with your clients, and when you go out and you go see the shows and you go see 40,000 people freaking out, that's, there's no feeling like that. So it's a much deeper connection than being somebody's lawyer or being somebody's A&R guy. Well, A&R guy is, I guess, similar, but you don't have the day in and day out kind of, back and forth of management. So that's my long-winded journey.
Yeah, that's a lot of information, and you've had a lot of great successes. So was Tiësto your very first management client?
Yes.
So what was it like? Talk about that a little bit, transitioning from attorney into manager, like into such a superstar client, probably one of the most successful EDM artists of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely challenging because, there's an aspect of lawyer that is, part manager, but, again, you're never getting the same level of access as a manager. So, and coming from being a lawyer, I tend to view things from a, sort of a legal perspective and framework. It took me, and I've said it to Tiësto. It's like it took me 2 years probably to really get comfortable with everything. Because he has a very big business. Like there's a lot of stuff happening, and getting to understand all those different areas takes a while. And B, not having been a manager before, it took a while to really get acclimated. I don't think that anything, I don't think that it's not like anything fell through the cracks, but for me to get to a place where I was like, okay, I get this, that was probably 2 years. And, he is famous for running through managers quickly. So I lasted 4, but in the 4 years since, there've been 2 more. So I got a relatively good run at it. And he won a Grammy while I was managing him, and so I'm very, I have no qualms about what happened. If you're managing Tiësto, you're going to get fired. It's a question of when, not if. And honestly, that opened the door for me to, continue to be a manager and have great clients. And so I'm eternally grateful to, to him and to Paul Morris as well. So.
Great. So is there anything in anybody that you've met in the past that has said something, whether it's a client, a previous manager, like a boss or supervisor, or at an internship, where somebody has said something that has really kind of resonated with you?
That's a tough one. I don't know. No, similarly, and I clearly, I don't want to say I stole it, but another manager, a significant manager said to me, with clients, it's always a question of when you're going to get fired, not if. And I think, having been through a couple firings, I now, I take that as gospel. And, the reality is there are very, very, very few managers who have stayed with their clients for the whole time. Managers may get tired of clients get tired of managers. Clients think that the manager is the problem, even though that's not the case. It's just shit happens. People change their minds. And it's, the problem is, it's not dissimilar from getting fired from a job, when you're emotionally invested in something. And I think management is particularly tough because you've given you've given yourself on a 24/7 basis for a number of years, to then turn around and have that person be like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need you anymore. That is a very challenging thing to deal with. When you've invested that kind of, energy, both, time energy and emotional energy. But I've gotten more comfortable with it because you have to.
Mm-hmm. Of course. So talk about kind of your recent ventures. Who are you working with now? Who have you recently started working with? And then we'll go from there.
Sure. I mean, I've been managing Blau for about 4.5 years. And I manage another guy named Sullivan King, who I've been managing for about a year and a half.
I love Sullivan King.
Yeah, he's extraordinary. And I just, they're both great guys. And I'm grateful to have clients who are appreciative of the work that, the management team does. It makes a huge difference. I think when you have somebody who says, and it's super simple, but when you have somebody who says, thank you, and, I appreciate you, it makes it, that makes it much easier to spend the time, the long hours and, whatever else to do what needs to be done. When you know that what you are doing will not go unnoticed. So that's been a nice development for me. And so, I mean, with Justin, who is Blau, obviously we've had a pretty extraordinary year because of his success in the NFT world. But, I think what most people don't appreciate is that that was the culmination of 4 years of him advocating for, blockchain technology, being a real vocal proponent of the technology and networking, and just really being a hustler. The funny thing was, when he had his amazing auction in late February, everybody post that thought, well, if Blau can make $11 million, I can make $25 million. So I had, so many managers calling me saying, you got to help me. How do we do this? But what they didn't realize was, like, it's not, it's about Blau. It's not it's not because Justin is the number one DJ in the world, because he's not, and he knows he's not. But he is the number one DJ in the tech scene. And that is why they supported him. So they love him because they appreciate that he appreciates them. And that obviously paid off in a huge way for him. So sometimes you're in the right place at the right time. And then with Sullivan King, he's got an extraordinary fan base who are, people who are super, super rabid. We do ridiculous amounts of merch. We do, literally 10 times the amount of merch that we would do on Tiësto, which is, obviously it's a very interesting situation, because I think lots of people love the top, DJs. It's like they'd love to go see them, but they don't feel the same way about Tiësto or David Guetta or whoever, from a sort of emotional connection standpoint, as they do about the people that they're, that they really love. So I think, I'm sure, I know Millennium sells more merch. I'm sure there's probably one or two other people, but, for us to sell, we did 7 figures of merch in 2020. So,
wow.
That's extraordinary
Yes.
in my mind.
That's amazing.
I feel super lucky to have both of these guys as clients. Each is doing something really, really special and different.
So there's quite a bit of a audience difference, and like Sullivan King isn't as big as Blau. I guess in some respects, they're on similar levels or on paths of the same way. But Sullivan King, I want to dig into how he's been able to kind of culminate his audience and his fan base to be so diehard to have an artist do 7 figures in merch like that. That's amazing. I never would have guessed he would have done that much in merch. So congrats on that, first of all.
Thank you. I think, it is a confluence of a number of things. He's fantastic on social media. He's very relatable, funny, entertaining, and people are naturally attracted to that. Like, that makes people feel much more connected to him than somebody who's just posting flyers or talking about their next show. He is himself on social media. And so people feel like they know him. And I think that plays a huge role. Also, he is really, I don't want to say the only person, but he is the most prominent person to kind of bridge the world of, hard rock, metal, and dubstep. And so you've got people who grew up in the, Warped Tour world, but who are now ravers. And this is an extraordinary bridge of their two worlds. It is everything that they feel kind of nostalgic about, brought into their current frame of reference. And so that's emotionally, that's very powerful. And so, and I think for people who are not in the EDM world, if you are coming from the hard rock metal world, to have something that feels familiar makes it feel safer. Like, okay, I can understand this. This doesn't feel super weird and different. It's different, but there's a lot in there that feels completely normal and usual to me. And so he's been an entry point for a lot of people who think they might like electronic music, but aren't sure where that entry point is. So, obviously we're talking about a subset of people who are, listening to hard rock and metal, but, for that subset, like he's a unique talent.
He very is, and like I agree with everything you said. He's fun on social media. He's very relatable. He's doing screaming videos with his parents and his girlfriend. I think he's very relatable. He seems like he's incredibly talented. I love a lot of his stuff. So going back to Blau, I want to talk just a little bit about the NFT sale. I think that's one of the biggest things to happen in this century or this decade for sure. But it's very interesting to see how he made $11 million. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around how that all works. Like, how does somebody make that much money in 24 hours? Something like that a week? Yeah. So what is an NFT, very briefly, and then talk about the process that led up to that.
An NFT stands for non-fungible token, and it is a digital file that rests on the blockchain of which there is of which ownership can be verified. So while you or I can have a JPEG on our computer, that is not the original, and that is not you don't own it. Obviously, you just downloaded it from somewhere. So it is the digital equivalent of owning a record or a or a painting, or, it's the digital equivalent of owning lots of things. And I think, the challenge has been getting people to understand that it's really not, it is a paradigm shift. There is we are going from a world where people felt the need to have a tangible item in their possession for that thing to have value. But we are now entering a world in which, and it's to me, it's understandable, where something that is digital can have the same properties as something that is tangible. There's no reason that the original file of something shouldn't hold value, shouldn't be valuable. And, listen, there are lots of people who don't have original paintings in their house. And so there will be lots of people who don't have one-of-one NFTs in their wallet. Like, it's not necessary for everybody. Though the technology is evolving, and NFTs will, I think, help enable lots of entertainment industries create a better fan experience for those fans who are truly, super fans, whatever. I think there are lots of things that will happen in the next 6, 12, 18 months that will change people's perception of NFTs. And in fact, they likely won't be called NFTs, because they will simply be called the fan token or something like that. But it's I will say, when Justin started, he did a festival in 2018 called OMF, which I'm going to blank on what that actually stood for right now. So I have to Google it. Sorry.
Okay.
So it was Our Music Festival, right?
Oh, yes.
And so it was a decentralized festival powered by blockchain and cryptocurrency. That meant that we had the ability for people to earn tokens at the festival and exchange those tokens for hard goods. So there was actual blockchain technology being used at this festival, which was amazing. But at the time, I was like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? I don't understand. Needless to say, in 2021, I feel very differently about it. But, from my perspective, I think, what we did is we supported the artist because that's what he wanted to do. And we provided the ability for him to go down that road because it was important to him. And obviously having managers who support your vision, whether or not that is, releasing records or doing something different, is, in my opinion, super important. And so, that's what Justin wanted to do. So that's what we supported him on. And again, it obviously, it paid off, in an enormous way, in February. But, it's been a journey, and I'm not nearly as deep in this world as Justin is. But I find it fascinating, and I am, I'm in tons of Discord groups, and, I'm reading things every day, and I find it, at my age, to be part of this, again, what I think of as a paradigm shift in the music business, to be able to be kind of at the center of that is incredibly exciting. And I feel very lucky that that Justin is my client.
Yeah, as you should, and you guys are doing amazing things, very powerhouse things that are going to, like you said, shift the entire industry. So I know NFTs. I'm in EDM.com. I write for them. I've been a music journalist for many years. And back in February, around when Justin was selling his NFTs, I mean, all I was getting was NFT pitches. Everybody and their mother and grandmother was selling an NFT. Yep. And it was like, what is going on here? And now it's like the last 2 or 3 months, it's been like non-existent. I haven't heard anything on NFTs. So are they still very big? Are they still going somewhere? Are they dying off? Like, where are we kind of at?
I mean, the market moves very, very quickly. So NFTs as a music and art combo are largely done because there were so many people who tried to cash in on that. And what we very quickly discovered was that other than with respect to Justin and RAC and maybe one or two other people, the only things that collectors cared about were the digital artists, were the people making the art, not the people making the music. It's, it is a very large, it is a relatively large group of art collectors who have significant amounts of cryptocurrency, and they don't give a crap about the musicians. They just don't. They care about the digital artists that they think are doing interesting, different things. There are all sorts of NFT things happening that are generating significant amounts of income. They just are not the combination of musicians and digital artists together. There's a sort of a very early NFT project called CryptoPunks. And they made 10,000 of them. This is like 2017. And those, late last week, I think somebody, a private equity fund bought like 80 of them at like over $1 million each. And there's another thing called the Bored Apes Yacht Club, which is a similar group of 10,000 NFTs, which have different, it's apes with different characteristics. And those similarly, Justin gave me one of them, and that's currently, I get bids on it. I get offers on it all the time. And it's the last offer I got was $21,000 for literally an image of a ape. It's a cartoon. So there's, honestly, there's so many things happening. It just is not that musicians and digital artists doing stuff together.
So the NFT boom, it's kind of more people are focused on like the actual pictures, JPEGs, PNGs, whatever file it is, versus an artist's music, like a WAV file or something.
Correct. There's also a very, very strong art component to it. There's a site called Artblocks.io that has been doing incredible business as well, and their secondary market is booming. They're just, the amount of money being exchanged is crazy. But so there are lots of areas where NFTs are incredibly healthy. And to me, that's the exciting thing, because new things come along every day. Somebody's like, oh, I'm doing this in the NFT world, and people go freak out because it's new, and they go, oh my God, I want that. So it moves at a ridiculously fast pace, but the market is, there was definitely a lull, April, May, June. But July and now August it looks super hot at the moment.
Okay. Interesting. So let's say you buy an artist's piece of art for $30,000. Does that go up in value? How does it work?
It totally depends. You can buy a piece of art for $30,000 and tomorrow the market can, just evaporate. Or you can buy it for $30,000 and all of a sudden it becomes the hottest thing in the world and it's worth $300,000 in a week. Both of those things happen. You have to have a very strong stomach to kind of play in this world. I do very little playing, but a little bit. I buy art that I love, that I think is reasonably priced, and if it goes up, then I'm happy, but I'm not selling it. So, I think you just have to, obviously you have to operate within your level of comfort. But I think, there's beautiful, beautiful stuff out there. And I mean, I was an art history major in college. I love, I love visual art. And so for me, it's very exciting again to be part of this new world. And I think, I'm trying to figure out what frame I want to get for my apartment so that I can show off my NFTs. Because I mean, not to show off, like, because I love them. I want to see them, and looking at them on my phone is not sufficient. So, there are a couple options in the frame world, but nothing that's really great yet. But, I think that's also going to be a big game changer when people have an easy solution to display their NFTs. I think that will make people much more interested in, dipping their toe in the water.
That was going to be my next question is how do you pay $30,000 for a piece of art. How do you display it? Do you look at it on your phone? Can you go to Walmart and print it off? Like what's the solution there?
You can do any of those. I mean, people absolutely make prints of their NFTs. But to me, the real game changer is when there is a great screen solution. Where you can simply connect your phone to that screen and have it cycle through your NFTs. I think to me, that's the game changer. And I think we'll have that by the end of the year.
Wow. Interesting. So when you sell a piece of art, or let's say Blau made his $11 million, where does that money go? Can he cash that out? Does it sit as a cryptocurrency? How does that work?
It's however he wants it to work. But yeah, I mean, that money is, that money was paid in Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency. And then, it's his call what he wants to do with it. He can keep it all in ETH. He can put it all in dollars. He can move it to Bitcoin. He can do whatever he wants.
Got it. And I can imagine that, like, when you cash that out, I would assume taxes and stuff come into play as well, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Got it.
I mean, taxes come into play regardless of whether you cash it out or not.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. And I know that Ethereum, I've read a lot about Ethereum being kind of difficult on the environment. So I'm wondering, is that something that Blau considers when he's working on these things? Because I know it's very taxing on the environment.
It's actually, I mean, the reality is that the NFT transactions that take place are such an incredibly small subset of the Ethereum transactions that happen across the world. I mean, it's relatively infinitesimal. Ethereum is kind of the blockchain for NFTs. And the good news is that there is a new upgrade coming called Layer 2, which is infinitely faster and infinitely less energy sucking. Wow. So, I mean, that's, we're 6 weeks, 2 months away from that, something like that. And so, it's from not only that, but all of the platforms have been very thoughtful about giving money to carbon offsets. So almost all of them are carbon neutral because they've donated significant amounts of money to offset their energy expenditure.
That's good to hear. I know it was kind of a big rave a couple months ago where it was like Ethereum is really taxing on the planet and it does this. And I mean, we're obviously not in a good place climate wise. We need to continue fighting to make sure that changes. We're neutral and we're fighting towards reducing carbon emissions. But that's good to hear that we're weeks away from a big upgrade in that space. So if somebody who wants to dabble into getting into NFTs, and there's so much out there, so many different platforms, and there's new ones every day, how does one be cautious of the ones that are scammy and staying away from that type of world and ones that are legit?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's really just about doing your homework, and reading people's, I mean, I think you have to figure out what you want to get into NFTs for. Are you doing it because you're speculating, or are you doing it because you want to buy art? And I think the answer to that question will inform what platform or platforms are right for you. There's a platform called Nifty Gateway that has kind of been the main popular NFT hub, and that it's not scammy at all. It's super reputable. But going and saying, well, I'm going to go buy an NFT because I think I'm going to make a lot of money from it is not the correct approach.
Right.
I'm relatively deep in this world, and I have never had any idea whether I'm going to make money on stuff or not. Like, you really have to buy it because you love it. And if you make money, then that's great. Otherwise, you're day trading NFTs, which is, not a real place to be. So it has to come from it can come from a speculation standpoint, but then you have to immerse yourself in a world that is very, very deep and not always rational. There's lots of stuff that happens that feels completely irrational. But that's just kind of how the market is working sometimes. But, you can't go in thinking, well, okay, well, I would expect it to go from X to Y. But, reality is it's going to go from X to Z because things don't happen in the manner that you expect them to happen necessarily.
So kind of the final questions here is, if an artist wants to get into NFTs and start selling their artwork, whether it be a musician or an artist, what are a couple things that you would recommend first? Because I know you said Blouse, it was like 4 years of everything that led up to that sale back in February.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to be a part of the community. If you just sort of drop some NFTs on this platform called OpenSea, where anybody can upload anything, like nobody's ever going to find it. It's it's like you being a musician and just uploading some shit to SoundCloud. Like nobody's ever going to find it. So unless you have a presence in that community, you're on Discord groups, you talk to people, you interact with other like-minded artists on Twitter. Like there has to be something that would make people say, you know what, I appreciate, now I see that person is truly invested in the blockchain world, and I want to support that. But, otherwise you are, a drop in the ocean and no one's ever going to find you.
That's good advice. So you've mentioned Discord servers a couple times. What are some of the good ones that you found that are maybe somebody can join to learn more about this or start getting involved in that community?
Sure. I mean, any platform, all the platforms have Discord servers. So that's an interesting place to be. Nifty has a Discord.
Got it.
Lots of the visual artists have Discords. Anything, sort of anything in this world generally has its own Discord server. Justin has his own Discord server. That website, Artblocks, that I was talking about, they have their own Discord server. Like you have to figure out what's interesting to you, and then insert yourself into that world. There is very real community there in a way that I have not seen elsewhere. I mean, Sullivan King has a Facebook group that's 15,000 people, and there's, an extraordinary community there because they are all united by their connection to him. And I'm sure there are other artists who have similar things, but like The NFT world is very small, relatively speaking. And they, you need to know your shit. In order to get respect, you have to show them that you know what you're doing. And listen, nobody comes in as a beginner, for lack of a better term, knowing everything. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I don't know this, I don't understand that. Can somebody please explain it to me? Sure. But to get to a point where you're, putting your art online and, expecting people to care, you need to give them a reason to care, other than just my art is great, because there's lots of art that's great and nobody buys it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Well, that's opened my eyes a little bit to more NFTs. I know I've been so inundated with it, and it's like there's so much junk to sift through, and everybody and their mother, like you said, is releasing one. So it's good to get a base understanding from somebody who really knows what they're talking about. So that was all the questions that I have for you, Andrew. I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I'm sure you're a very busy guy. And how can listeners keep up with you or follow all the amazing work that you're doing, whether in NFTs or management?
That's a tough one. I guess, Twitter, Instagram, I guess. Sure. But, I think, my personal philosophy with respect to management is the artist is the person who's out front and the manager is the person who does not. Obviously there are lots of managers who are, who take a very different approach and want to be, in the spotlight. But, from my perspective, it's like, it's my job to make the artist the star. So I do my best to kind of stay in the background. But, certainly there's stuff on Twitter that I, repost or talk about that's, that I find interesting. So yeah. Great.
Yeah. And you've done a great job with the Sullivan King, because they're both him and Justin are very outspoken people, and you've pivoted them as experts in, like Justin, in the NFT space, and Sullivan, and just being organic and selling all that merch. So you've done a great job and doing all that. Keep it all up. And again, thanks for being on the show, and we'll chat soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.